The Bench by the Lake. A true story. Or maybe not. But it felt real enough to change my life. I still remember that day like it happened yesterday. The sky was quiet. Not gray, not blue. Just quiet. You know that kind of silence that makes you feel like the world has paused for a second? Yeah, it was one of those days. I was walking to the lake, the one just outside my old hometown. A place I hadn't been to in years. Not because I didn't want to go, but because it reminded me of someone. Someone I lost. There's a wooden bench there. It's nothing special. Old, worn out, and a little crooked on one side. But that bench holds more stories than some libraries. And one of them is mine. I was 17 when I first met him. His name was Mr. Thomas, a quiet old man who always sat on that bench. Every morning at exactly 7:30 a.m., rain or shine, summer or winter, he was there. At first, I thought he was just one of those lonely retired people. You know, the ones who feed ducks and talk to strangers. But he wasn't like that. He didn't talk much. He didn't feed the ducks. He just sat there, watching the water, still, calm. Like a statue with a heartbeat. One day, I sat down beside him. No reason. I wasn't feeling great that day. My father had yelled at me again. Something about my grades, or my future, or both. I just needed to get away. So I went to the lake and sat next to a stranger. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then he said something that I've never forgotten. Sometimes, silence says what words never can. I looked at him. He didn't even turn his head, just kept staring at the water. I nodded. That was the beginning. Sometimes, the quietest people hold the loudest stories. After that first day, I started visiting the bench more often. Not every day, but often enough for Mr. Thomas to notice. He never asked why I came. He never pried into my life. But every time I sat beside him, I felt like I could breathe again. At school, I was the kid who didn't quite fit in. At home, I was the son who couldn't meet expectations. But by the lake, sitting in silence beside that old man, I was just me. No pressure, no judgment, just peace. One morning, I found him reading a book. It was a small, worn-out copy of something I didn't recognize. I asked him, "What are you reading?" He looked at the cover, then at me, and said,
"A story about a man who thought he had all the time in the world until he didn't."
Then he closed the book, gently, as if the pages were fragile memories. He looked out at the lake again and said quietly, "Funny thing about time, it doesn't stop, not even when you need it to." I didn't know what to say, so I just sat beside him, letting his words sink in like stones in deep water. Over the weeks, I started telling him things I didn't tell anyone. Like how I felt like a failure, how I didn't know what I wanted to be, how my dad made me feel like I'd never be enough. Mr. Thomas didn't give advice. He just listened. And sometimes, when I finished speaking, he'd say something short, but meaningful, like, "The strongest trees grow in the wildest winds," or, "Your worth isn't measured by someone else's ruler." I didn't realize it then, but I was changing. And it was because of him. Then, one morning, he wasn't there. 7:30 came. I waited. 7:45. 8 o'clock. No Mr. Thomas. At first, I thought maybe he was just sick or late, but he didn't come the next day either, or the day after that. And just like that, he was gone. We often notice the value of a moment only when it becomes a memory. Bunny. Days turned into weeks. I still went to the bench every morning. At first, I hoped he'd show up again. Then I started hoping for just a sign. But the bench stayed empty. And the lake, it felt different without him. I remember sitting there, staring at the water, wondering, did I even really know him? He knew my fears, my struggles, my dreams. But what did I know about him? Nothing. Not his full name, not where he lived, not even if he had family, just Mr. Thomas. And suddenly, I felt this ache in my chest. I had let someone into my heart, but I never asked to enter theirs. Bunny. One evening, just before sunset, I walked to the lake again. The bench was there, like always. But this time, something was different. There was an envelope, taped under the bench. It had my name on it. Just one word. Eli. My name. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a letter, written in that same neat, careful handwriting I'd seen in his books. It read, "Bye. Dear Eli, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back to the bench. Don't worry, I'm not sad. My time simply ran out. But I couldn't leave without saying goodbye. And thank you. You reminded me what it means to be young, to feel, to dream, to hope again. You see, I once had a son. He was a lot like you, smart, kind, a little lost maybe. But I was too proud, too strict. I pushed him away before I ever told him I loved him. We hadn't spoken in over 10 years. And I suppose that's why I kept coming to the bench, hoping he might walk by someday. He never did. But you did. And for a few months, it felt like I had a second chance. Thank you, Eli, for sitting beside an old man who needed someone more than he knew. Keep going, keep growing, and never forget to tell the people you love before time decides it's too late. With warmth, Thomas. Bye. I stared at the letter for a long time. Not crying. Not yet. Just silent. Like the sky on that first day I met him. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't saying goodbye, but learning to forgive yourself. After reading the letter, I didn't know what to do with all the feelings swirling inside me. Sadness, gratitude, regret, hope. I kept coming back to the bench, sometimes with the letter in my pocket, sometimes with nothing but the sound of the lake. One chilly morning, I noticed something new. A small notebook, tucked under the same bench, carefully wrapped in plastic to protect it from rain. Curious, I opened it. Inside were pages and pages of Mr. Thomas's thoughts, his memories, his regrets, his love. He wrote about his son, how proud he was, how much he wished things had been different. He wrote about his own fears, how he thought saying, "I love you," was a sign of weakness. But most of all, he wrote about change, about how sometimes it's not too late to heal broken bonds. Reading those pages felt like sitting beside him again, listening to his quiet voice. And I realized something important. We all carry silence inside us. Unspoken words, hidden feelings, regrets we don't know how to fix. But silence can also be a bridge, if we choose to cross it. That day, I made a promise. To myself, to the people I love, to never wait too long, to speak from my heart, to forgive more easily, because life isn't about perfect moments. It's about real ones, messy, imperfect, beautiful. And sometimes, all it takes is a simple bench by a lake to remind us. Every ending is a new beginning. If we choose to see it that way, resin is like Mendan. The last time I went to the lake, the bench looked just the same, but I wasn't the same. I brought the letter and the notebook with me, placed them gently on the bench. I sat down, and for the first time, I spoke out loud. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas," I said, "for the silence, the stories, and the courage to change." The wind whispered through the trees as if answering back. That day, I called my dad. I told him things I'd never said before, about my fears, my hopes, my love. It wasn't easy, but it was real, and it was worth it, said. The bench by the lake taught me something I'll never forget. We don't always get second chances, but we do get moments, moments to be kind, moments to forgive, moments to speak the words that matter most. So if there's someone in your life you've been holding back from, say hello, say sorry, say I love you. Because one day the bench might be empty, and all that will remain are the memories we chose to create. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you to cherish the moments and the people around you, because sometimes the smallest benches hold the biggest lessons.